The stars above Kepler 442b looked different today. They flickered with the light of burning ships and the flash of weapons fire. Admiral Tae-hyun stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the last hope of the galaxy prepare for what might be their final battle. The desert planet below them had once been home to millions of people. Now it was empty except for the wind and sand. The Vorthak Empire had taken everything else. Tae-hyun looked at the small fleet around his ship. 20 vessels from different worlds, all that remained of the great Galactic Defense Coalition. The Nexari had sent their crystal ships that sparkled like jewels in space. The Veiltar brought their cloud-like vessels that seemed to float on invisible currents. The insect-like Kethron flew in their hive ships, dark and angular against the stars. And then there were the humans. Lieutenant Commander Hye-jin stood at her station, studying the tactical displays with intense focus. Her dark eyes moved quickly across the screens, taking in every detail of their defensive positions. She was young for her rank, but she had earned her place through quick thinking and clever strategies. The humans were still new to galactic warfare. Most alien species thought they were primitive, barely worth including in the coalition, but Admiral Tae-hyun had seen what humans could do when pushed to their limits. They thought differently than other species. Sometimes that difference was exactly what was needed. Captain Dong-wook walked over to join them at the command station. The xenobiologist had studied alien species for most of his life, but even he seemed nervous today. His hands shook slightly as he held his data pad. The Vorthak fleet should arrive within the hour, Dong-wook said quietly. Our scouts confirm at least 50 warships, possibly more. Tae-hyun nodded grimly. 50 Vorthak ships against their 20. The numbers were bad, but that was not what worried him most. The Vorthak had never lost a major battle. Never. In 300 years of expansion across the galaxy, they had crushed every enemy they faced. The Vorthak were not just good at war, they were perfect at it. Their ships were stronger, their weapons more powerful, their tactics flawless. They studied each enemy carefully before attacking, learning every weakness, every fear. By the time they struck, victory was already certain. But today felt different somehow. Hye-jin looked up from her screens. Admiral, I am seeing something strange in the long-range sensors. What kind of strange? Tae-hyun asked. The Vorthak fleet is approaching in their standard attack formation. But they are moving slower than usual. Much slower. Dr. Kyung-soo, the coalition's military historian, leaned over to look at the data. Perhaps they are being extra careful. This is the largest coalition fleet they have faced in months. Hye-jin shook her head. No, sir, this is not caution. Look at the formation spacing. It is too wide for an attack formation, but too narrow for a defensive one. It is like they cannot decide what they want to do. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of ships moving into position. Every person there knew what the Vorthak could do. They had all lost friends, family, entire worlds to the Empire's endless hunger for conquest. Contact from the Nexari flagship, the communications officer reported. Captain Velandra wants to know if we should begin the retreat to fallback position Beta. Tae-hyun considered this. They had planned 3 fallback positions, each one further from the planet. The idea was to make the Vorthak work for their victory, to cost them as much as possible before the inevitable end. But something made him hesitate. Tell Captain Velandra to hold position for now, he said. Let us see what the Vorthak do first. Minutes passed slowly. The enemy fleet grew larger on their screens, the familiar wedge-shaped ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Each Vorthak vessel was a work of deadly art, built for one purpose: total destruction of anything that opposed them. But as they watched, something impossible happened. The Vorthak fleet simply stopped. Sensors show they are still 20,000 kilometers out, Hyojin reported, her voice filled with confusion. They have dropped out of faster-than-light travel, but they are not advancing. Dongwook checked his instruments twice before speaking. I am reading full power on all their ships. Weapons are charged, shields are up, but they are just sitting there. The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. This was not how Vorthak battles went. The Empire's forces were famous for their swift, brutal attacks. They did not hesitate. They did not wait. They certainly did not give their enemies time to think. Are they scanning us? Tae-hyun asked. Yes, sir. Deep scans on all frequencies. But it has been going on for 10 minutes now. That is much longer than they usually need. Hee-jin turned from her station. Admiral, I think we should try to contact them. Contact the Vorthak? Dr. Kyung-soo looked shocked. They do not talk during battles. They just attack. Exactly, Hee-jin said. They always attack immediately. The fact that they are not attacking means something is wrong. Maybe we can find out what. Tae-hyun thought about this. In all the records of Vorthak battles, there was no mention of them ever responding to communications from enemies. But there was also no record of them ever just sitting in space doing nothing. Open a channel, he ordered. The communications officer worked at his controls for a moment. Channel open, sir. Vorthak Fleet, this is Admiral Tae-hyun of the Galactic Defense Coalition. We are prepared to discuss terms if you wish to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. They waited. The seconds stretched into minutes. No response came from the enemy fleet. But something else happened that was even more disturbing. Sir, the sensor operator called out, his voice tight with worry. The Vorthak ships are powering down their weapons. What? Tae-hyun moved to look at the displays himself. Weapons are going offline across their entire fleet. Shields are still up, but weapon systems are shutting down one by one. Hye-jin stared at the readings in disbelief. This makes no sense. Why would they disarm themselves? Captain Dong-wook had gone pale. In all my years studying alien behavior, I have never seen anything like this. The Vorthak are the most aggressive species in known space. They do not disarm, they do not retreat, they do not show mercy. Then what are they doing? Tae-hyun demanded. Before anyone could answer, the communications officer spoke up again. Sir, I am picking up transmissions from the Vorthak fleet, not directed at us, but internal communications. Can you translate them? Working on it, sir. The officer's fingers flew over his controls. Got it. The message is repeating on all frequencies. It says impossible over and over again. The word hung in the air like a weight. Impossible. What could make the unbeatable Vorthak Empire think something was impossible? Hye-jin looked at the tactical display again, her mind racing. The Vorthak ships had formed a defensive circle, all facing outward. Not toward the coalition fleet, but toward empty space beyond them. They are not looking at us, she said quietly. They are looking for something else. As if her words had summoned it, every alarm on the bridge began to sound at once. The sensor displays flickered and went wild. Something was coming. Something that had made the unbeatable armies of the Vorthak Empire fall completely silent. The alarms stopped as quickly as they had started, leaving the bridge in an eerie silence. Jin worked frantically at her console, trying to make sense of what the sensors had detected. Whatever had caused the readings was gone now, but the effects remained. The Vorthak fleet was still motionless in space, their ships arranged in that strange defensive formation. For 3 hours now they had not moved, not attacked, not even responded to communications. It was the most unnatural thing anyone on the bridge had ever witnessed. "Sensor sweep complete," Jin reported. "I am finding nothing unusual in the space around us. Whatever triggered the alerts, it is not showing up on any of our instruments." Admiral Tae-hyun paced behind the command stations. His years of military experience told him this was wrong in every possible way. Enemies did not behave like this. There were rules to warfare, patterns that could be predicted and planned for. The Vorthak were breaking all of them. Captain Dong-wook had been studying the enemy formation for hours, comparing it to every battle record in their database. His expression grew more puzzled with each passing minute. "Admiral, I have reviewed 300 years of Vorthak battle tactics. This formation appears in none of them. In fact, it goes against everything we know about their military doctrine." "What do you mean?" Tae-hyun asked. "Look at how they are positioned. All weapons facing outward, away from us. Engines at minimum power, just enough to maintain position. Shield generators running at maximum, but not the attack-focused shields they usually deploy." Dong-wook brought up a tactical display that showed the Vorthak ships in detail. "These are defensive positions, Admiral. They are afraid of something." Dr. Kyung-soo laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The Vorthak afraid? That is impossible. They are the ones everyone else fears." Jin turned from her station. "Dr. Kyung-soo is right. The Vorthak do not feel fear. But they do feel something else that might look the same from the outside." "What do you mean?" Tae-hyun asked. "Respect," Jin said simply. "They respect superior firepower. When they encounter something stronger than themselves, they study it carefully before deciding how to proceed." She pulled up her own analysis of the enemy fleet's behavior. "Look at their scanning patterns. They are not scanning us anymore. All their sensor arrays are focused on a specific point in space, approximately 50,000 kilometers beyond our position." Tae-hyun studied the display. "I see nothing there." "Neither do I. But the Vorthak clearly see something we do not. And whatever it is, it has them more concerned than our entire coalition fleet." The communications officer suddenly straightened at his station. "Sir, incoming message from the Nexari flagship." "Put it through." Captain Velandra's crystalline form appeared on the main screen. The Nexari were beautiful beings, their bodies made of living crystal that reflected light in amazing patterns. But today, Velandra's usually bright colors were dim with worry. "Admiral Tae-hyun, my science officers are detecting strange energy readings from the Vorthak fleet. They appear to be charging their faster-than-light drives." "For retreat?" Tae-hyun asked hopefully. "We do not know. The energy buildup is unlike anything we have seen before. It is as if they are preparing for an emergency jump, but they are not moving toward any known hyperspace route." Dr. Kyung-soo stepped forward. "Captain Velandra, in your people's history, have the Vorthak ever retreated from a battle?" The Nexari captain's colors shifted to deep blue, their equivalent of shaking her head. "Never. In 500 years of recorded contact with the Empire, they have never withdrawn from any engagement, no matter the odds." Jin looked at the tactical display again. Something was bothering her about the Vorthak formation, something beyond the obvious strangeness of their defensive posture. She enhanced the image, studying each ship individually. "Admiral, I think. I know what is happening. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at her. The Vorthak are not just afraid. They are waiting for permission. Permission for what? Tae-hyun asked. To leave. Look at their formation again, but this time think of it as a queue, not a battle line. They are arranged in the order they will. Jump to hyperspace. The flagship is positioned to go first, followed by the heavy cruisers, then the destroyers and support vessels. She highlighted different groups of ships on the display. This is not a defensive formation. It is an evacuation formation. They are ready to run, but something is making them wait. Captain Dong-wook moved to his own console and began analyzing the Vorthak communications. Hee-jin might be right. I am detecting a lot of internal chatter between their ships. Most of it is too heavily encrypted to translate, but the emotional context is clear. What kind of emotional context? Tae-hyun asked. Fear, uncertainty, and something else. Dong-wook paused, checking his readings again. Respect, deep, profound respect for something they consider far superior to themselves. The bridge fell, silent as everyone absorbed this information. The idea that the Vorthak Empire, conquerors of half the galaxy, could be afraid of anything was almost impossible to accept. But the evidence was right there in front of them. Hye-jin turned back, too, her sensors focusing on the empty space that had the Vorthak so concerned. She tried every scanning method she knew, from basic radar to exotic particle detection. Nothing showed up on any of them. But then she remembered something from her training. Human ships use different technology than most alien vessels. Their sensors worked on different principles, looked for different things. Maybe she could see something the others could not. She switched to the human-designed detection systems. Immediately, her displays lit up with new information. "Admiral!" She called out. "I am detecting something. Very faint, but it is there." "What is it?" "A ship. A very large ship. It is using some kind of advanced stealth technology that our regular sensors cannot penetrate. But the human systems can detect the gravitational distortion it creates." Tae-hyun rushed to her station. "How large?" Hee-jin checked her readings twice before answering. "At least twice the size of a Vorthak dreadnought, maybe larger. It is hard to tell because the stealth field is so advanced." "Is it moving?" "No, sir. It has been in the same position since before the Vorthak arrived. It is just sitting there, watching." Dr. Kyung-soo joined them at the sensor station. "Could it be another alien species? Someone we have not encountered before?" "Possible," Hye-jin said. "But the technology readings are strange. Some of the energy signatures look almost familiar." Before she could explain further, every screen on the bridge flickered. For just a moment, they all displayed the same image, a ship unlike anything in their databases. It was sleek and powerful, with lines that somehow looked both alien and familiar at the same time. Then the image was gone, and their screens returned. "To normal." "What was that?" Tae-hyun demanded. The communications officer was frantically checking his equipment. "I do not know, sir. It was not a transmission. The image just appeared on all our displays simultaneously." Hye-jin stared at her blank screen, trying to remember every detail of what she had seen. There had been something about that ship, something that tugged at her memory. "Admiral," she said slowly, "I think we are about to find out why the Vorthak are so afraid." The tension on the bridge had grown thick enough to cut with a knife. 6 hours had passed since the Vorthak fleet had taken their strange defensive positions, and still nothing had changed. The enemy ships remained motionless, their sensors focused on empty space, their weapons powered down. Hyjin could not stop thinking about the mysterious image that had appeared on their screens. The ship in the picture had looked powerful and dangerous, but there was something else about it that bothered her, something she could not quite identify. "Admiral," she said, turning from her station, "I request permission to take a scout ship closer to the Vorthak fleet." Admiral Tae-hyun looked at her as if she had suggested jumping out an airlock. "Absolutely not. That would be suicide." "Sir, with respect, I do not think it would be. The Vorthak have not fired a single shot in 6 hours. Their weapons are still powered down. I think I can get close enough to scan them properly without being detected." Captain Dongwook shook his head. "Even if their weapons are down, they still have point defense systems. And they're fighters." "But they are not launching fighters," Hyejin pointed out. "Look at their hangar bays. All sealed. No combat air patrols, no reconnaissance flights. They are not acting like a fleet preparing for battle." Dr. Kyung-soo studied the tactical display. "She has a point. In every recorded Vorthak engagement, they launch fighters immediately upon arriving in a system. It is standard procedure for them." Admiral Tae-hyun considered this. Everything about this situation was wrong, and he needed more information to make the right decisions. But sending one of his officers on what could be a suicide mission was not something he could do lightly. "What kind of scout ship?" he asked finally. "The Soul's Pride," Hyejin said immediately. "It has the most advanced stealth systems in the fleet, and it is fast enough to escape if things go wrong." The Soul's Pride was a human-designed vessel, one of the newest ships in the Coalition fleet. It was small and lightly armed, but it had technology that most alien species found confusing and unpredictable. That unpredictability might be exactly what they needed. "You would go alone?" Tae-hyun asked. "Yes, sir. One person means less chance of detection, and the ship's systems are designed for single-pilot operation." Tae-hyun was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks against the need for information. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. But you maintain constant communication, and at the first sign of trouble, you retreat immediately." "Understood, sir." 20 minutes later, Hyejin was strapped into the pilot's seat of the Soul's Pride, running through pre-flight checks. The small ship hummed quietly around her, its advanced systems coming online one by one. She had flown this type of vessel many times before, but never into enemy territory. "Soul's Pride, this is Control," came Admiral Tae-hyun's voice over the communication system. "You are cleared for departure. Good luck." "Thank you, sir." Beginning approach to Vorthak fleet. Hyejin engaged the stealth systems and guided her ship away from the Coalition fleet. The Soul's Pride seemed to disappear from normal sensors, becoming little more than a whisper of disturbed space moving toward the enemy. As she flew closer to the Vorthak ships, Hyejin marveled at their size and power. Each vessel was a masterpiece of military engineering built for maximum destruction. Their dark hulls absorbed light, making them look like holes cut out of space itself. But they were not moving, not firing, not even tracking her approach with their sensors. "Control, this is Soul's Pride. I am now within scanning range of the enemy fleet. Beginning detailed sensor sweep." Hyejin activated every sensor array on her ship, painting the Vorthak vessels with scanning beams across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. What she found made her heart race. "Control, you are not going to believe this. The Vorthak ships are powered down to minimum levels. Life support only. No weapons, no shields, no active sensors." "Are you certain?" came Dr. Kyung-soo's voice. "Positive." These ships are in what we would call stealth mode. They are trying to be as invisible as possible. Hyojin continued her scans, moving carefully between the massive enemy vessels. The Vorthak crews had to know she was there, but none of them made any move to intercept her. It was like flying through a graveyard of ships. Control, I am detecting something else. The Vorthak are broadcasting on a very specific frequency. It is heavily encrypted, but I think I can break it with the Soul's Pride's computers. She set the ship's artificial intelligence to work on the enemy transmissions while she continued her reconnaissance. The Vorthak formation was even stranger. Up close, the ships were arranged in perfect spacing, but not for battle. They looked more like they were preparing for a ceremony. "Got it," she said as her computer finished decrypting the transmissions. "Control. The Vorthak are sending a single message, repeated over and over. It translates to impossible in Standard Galactic." "Impossible what?" came Admiral Tae-hyun's voice. "Just impossible. That is the entire message. But there is something else. They are not broadcasting to each other. The signal is directed outward, toward that empty space they keep scanning." Hyojin brought her ship around to get a better look at the area that had the Vorthak so concerned. She activated her human-designed sensors, the ones that had detected the gravitational distortion earlier. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. "Control, I am reading a massive object approximately 50,000 kilometers from the Vorthak fleet. It is definitely a ship, and it is huge, much larger than anything in our databases." "Can you identify it?" Dr. Kyung-soo asked. Hyojin tried every recognition program in her computer, but nothing matched. The ship was like nothing she had ever seen, yet something about its design seemed familiar. Negative on identification. But Control, there is something very strange about this vessel. The energy signatures I am reading, some of them match technology in our own databases. "What do you mean?" "I mean this ship is using human technology. Advanced human technology, more advanced than anything we have ever built. But definitely human in origin." The communications channel was silent for several long moments as everyone absorbed this impossible information. "That cannot be right," Admiral Tae-hyun said finally. "Humans have only been in space for 50 years. We do not have the technology to build ships that large." "I know, sir, but the readings do not lie. This is human technology, just better." "Much better." Hyojin continued her scans of the mysterious vessel. The more data she gathered, the more confused she became. The ship showed signs of incredibly advanced engineering, but the basic principles were definitely human. It was like looking at a car and recognizing it as a car, even though it was clearly built by someone with much better tools and knowledge. "Control, I am detecting movement. The unknown vessel is changing position." She watched her sensors carefully as the massive ship began to move. It was still cloaked, still invisible to most detection methods, but its gravitational signature was shifting. "It is moving toward the Vorthak fleet," she reported. As soon as she said those words, every Vorthak ship in the enemy fleet suddenly came to life. Engines fired, shields activated, and the entire formation began moving away from the approaching vessel. But they were not moving toward the coalition fleet. They were moving away from everything, heading for the edge of the star system at maximum speed. "Control, the Vorthak are retreating. The entire fleet is running away." Hyojin had never seen anything like it. The most powerful military force in the galaxy was fleeing in panic, abandoning their positions and their tactical objectives. Whatever that cloaked ship was, it terrified them more than death itself. "Soul's Pride, return to the fleet immediately," Admiral Tae-hyun ordered. "On my way, sir." As Hyejin turned her ship around and headed back toward friendly forces, she took one last look at her sensors. The mysterious vessel was still there, still cloaked, still following the retreating Vorthak ships. She had the feeling that whatever was about to happen would change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. And somehow, it was going to involve humanity in ways they could never have imagined. The Coalition fleet's main conference room had never felt so crowded. Representatives from every species sat around the large circular table, their faces showing confusion and fear in equal measure. The Vorthak retreat had shaken everyone's understanding of how the galaxy worked. Dr. Kyung-soo stood at the front of the room, surrounded by holographic displays showing historical data from across known space. He had been working for hours, digging through ancient records and forgotten archives, looking for any mention of ships like the one Hyejin had detected. "What I am about to tell you will sound impossible," he began. "But the evidence is clear. This is not the first time something like this has happened." Admiral Tae-hyun leaned forward in his chair. "Explain." Dr. Kyung-soo activated the first display, showing a timeline that stretched back thousands of years. "I have found references to similar events throughout galactic history. Ships appearing from nowhere, causing powerful empires to retreat in terror, then disappearing without explanation." Captain Valandra's crystalline form flickered with nervous light. "What kind of references?" "Vorthak military records, for one. They keep detailed accounts of every battle they fight. But there are gaps. Entire campaigns that end suddenly with no explanation. When I cross-referenced these gaps with other historical sources, I found a pattern." He brought up another display, this one showing Vorthak territorial maps over time. Every few centuries, the Vorthak expansion stops, not because they are defeated in normal warfare, but because they simply withdraw from entire sectors of space. The official records call these strategic repositioning, but the private communications I managed to decrypt tell a different story. Captain Dong-wook studied the displays carefully. "What do the private communications say?" "They mention something called the Silent Death. Ships that appear without warning and strike without mercy. But here is the strange part. They only attack aggressive, expanding empires. Civilizations that are defending themselves or living peacefully are left alone." Hyejin looked up from her notes. "That matches what we observed. The mysterious ship did not attack us. It focused entirely on the Vorthak." Dr. Kyung-soo nodded and activated another display. "The Nexari have similar legends. Captain Valandra, your people call them crystal breakers, do they not?" The Nexari captain's colors shifted to deep purple, the equivalent of a nod. "Ancient stories from before the modern era. Ships that could shatter our strongest crystal hulls with weapons we could not understand. But those are just myths." "Are they?" Dr. Kyung-soo asked. "I found records in your own archives. 3,000 years ago, the Nexari Empire controlled this entire sector. Then, in the span of a single year, you retreated to your current borders. Your own histories say it was because of internal problems, but the timing matches perfectly with Vorthak references to silent death encounters." He turned to another alien representative. "Commander Zithak, the Veiltar have stories too. What do your people call them?" The gaseous being's form swirled nervously. "Wind killers. Beings who could destroy the very air we breathe. But those are children's stories, meant to teach caution." "And the Kethran?" Dr. Kyung-soo looked at the insectoid delegate. The Kethran's antenna twitched. Hive enders, ships that could kill an entire colony with a single strike. Our ancestors spoke of them in the deep memories, but we thought they were warnings about natural disasters. Dr. Kyung-soo activated a final display, this one showing all the different accounts overlaid on a single timeline. Every major species in this part of the galaxy has the same story. Mysterious ships that appear during times of war strike once with devastating effect, then disappear. But they always follow the same pattern. He highlighted specific sections of the timeline. They only appear when one species is trying to conquer others. They only attack the aggressors. And they always end conflicts quickly and decisively. Admiral Tae-hyun studied the data carefully. You are suggesting that there is some unknown force in the galaxy that acts as a peacekeeping mechanism? Not unknown anymore, Hyejin said quietly. We know who they are. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. The ship I scanned was using human technology. Advanced human technology, but definitely human. These silent death ships, these crystal breakers and wind killers, they are human ships from our future. The room erupted in protests and arguments. The idea was too strange, too impossible to accept. Humans had only been in space for a few decades. They were barely capable of interstellar travel, let alone building ships that could terrify the Vorthak Empire. Captain Dong-wook raised his hand for silence. Actually, that would explain several things that have been bothering me about the Vorthak behavior. Such as? Admiral Tae-hyun asked. Their reaction was not just fear. It was recognition. They knew what they were facing. If these ships have been appearing throughout history, the Vorthak would have detailed records of them. They would know exactly how dangerous they are. Dr. Kyung-soo nodded enthusiastically. That would also explain why the legends from different species are so similar. They are all describing the same phenomenon just from different perspectives and different time periods. Hyejin pulled up her own analysis of the mysterious ship's technology. Look at these energy signatures. The basic principles are human, but the application is centuries ahead of anything we have developed. It is like comparing a wooden cart to a hover car. The same basic concept, but with technology we cannot yet imagine. Captain Velandra's colors shifted to bright yellow, indicating deep thought. If this is true, it raises serious questions about the nature of time and causality. How can humans from the future be affecting events in the past? Maybe they are not affecting events, Dr. Kyung-soo suggested. Maybe they are just maintaining a balance that already exists. Think about it. If aggressive empires are stopped before they can grow too large, it prevents galaxy-wide wars that could destroy everything. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. If humans were destined to become the galaxy's peacekeepers, what did that mean for the current conflict? What did it mean for humanity's future? Hyejin looked around the table at all the alien faces, seeing fear and uncertainty in their expressions. But she also saw something else. Hope. For the first time in this war, they had encountered something that the Vorthak truly feared. There is something else we need to consider, she said. These future humans, these silent death ships, they did not attack the coalition fleet. They focused entirely on the Vorthak. That suggests they see us as worth protecting. Admiral Tae-hyun leaned back in his chair. Or it means we are not seen as a threat yet. Either way, Dr. Kyung-soo said, we now know that the Vorthak have a weakness. They can be frightened. They can be made to retreat. We just need to understand how. Captain Dong-wook was studying the historical data with new interest. If the pattern holds, the mysterious ship will not interfere directly in our conflict. These future humans seem to work by intimidation and psychological warfare rather than direct military action, which means we still have to win this war ourselves, Admiral Tae-hyun said. But now we know it can be won. Hye-jin stared at the tactical displays, her mind racing with possibilities. Somewhere out there, a ship full of humans from the future was watching their every move. They had the power to end this war instantly, but for reasons of their own, they chose not to. Instead, they had given the coalition something even more valuable than victory. They had given them hope. The question now was what to do with that hope. How could they use the knowledge of humanity's future to change the present, and what price would they have to pay for that knowledge? The space between the coalition fleet and the retreating Vorthak ships had been empty for hours. Then, without any warning, reality seemed to tear itself apart. Hye-jin was the first to see it happen. She was on duty at the sensor station when the readings suddenly went wild. Energy levels spiked beyond anything their instruments could measure. Space itself rippled like water, bending light in impossible ways. "Admiral to the bridge," she called out, her voice tight with excitement and fear. Admiral Tae-hyun arrived just as the phenomenon reached its peak. The main view screen showed an area of space that looked like broken glass, with stars visible through cracks in the darkness. Then, in a flash of brilliant light, something massive appeared where nothing had been before. It was a ship unlike anything in their databases. Long and sleek, it looked like a sword made of metal and light. Its hull was dark, but shot through with veins of energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. Weapons ports lined its sides, but they were closed, giving no hint of the destruction they might contain. "Size estimate?" Admiral Tae-hyun asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 2 kilometers long, half a kilometer wide, Hye-jin reported. "Mass readings are off the charts. This thing could probably destroy our entire fleet without even noticing." Captain Dong-wook had arrived on the bridge and was staring at the massive vessel in amazement. "The design is incredible. Look at those lines, that structure. It is built for speed and power, but also for elegance. Whoever made this understands beauty as well as warfare." Dr. Kyung-soo joined them, his face pale with excitement. "This has to be one of the ships from the legends, the silent death that the Vorthak fear so much." As they watched, the mysterious vessel moved with fluid grace, positioning itself directly between the coalition fleet and the retreating Vorthak ships. It made no aggressive moves, but its presence was clearly a message. The Vorthak were not welcome here. "Are you detecting any weapons fire?" Admiral Tae-hyun asked. "Negative," Hye-jin replied. "The ship is not attacking anyone. It is just watching." Then, cutting through the silence of space, came a transmission that made everyone on the bridge freeze in shock. "This is Captain Woo Jin of the UES Indomitable, Human Colonial Fleet. We received a distress signal." The voice was speaking Korean, clear and confident, but the words themselves were impossible to believe. Admiral Tae-hyun found his voice first. "This is Admiral Tae-hyun of the Galactic Defense Coalition. Did you say Human Colonial Fleet?" "That is correct, Admiral. I apologize for the delay in responding to your distress call. We were engaged in operations in the Outer Rim and could not arrive sooner." Captain Dong-wook looked at the sensor readings in disbelief. "The Outer Rim? That is 50,000 light-years from here. No ship can travel that distance in hours." "Our ship can," came the calm reply. "We have been monitoring the situation here for some time. The Vorthak Empire's aggression against the coalition worlds required our intervention. Hyojin was frantically scanning the massive vessel, trying to understand its technology. What she found made her head spin. "Admiral, this ship is using technology that should not exist. Their power output alone is greater than our entire fleet combined." "Captain Wu Jin," Admiral Tae-hyun said carefully, "can you explain how a human ship came to possess such advanced technology? Humanity has only been spacefaring for 50 years. There was a pause before the answer came. "Admiral, that is a complicated question. The short answer is that we represent humanity's future. The long answer will require us to meet in person." On the main view screen, the image changed to show the interior of the mysterious ship's bridge. What they saw there defied everything they thought they knew about human technology. The bridge was vast and filled with holographic displays that showed tactical information in 3 dimensions. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency, their uniforms unlike anything in current human military fashion. And at the center of it all stood Captain Wu Jin. He was clearly human, with the same Asian features as many of the Coalition crew. But there was something different about him, something that spoke of experience with warfare on a scale they could barely imagine. "As you can see," Captain Wu Jin said, "we are indeed human, but we come from a time approximately 300 years in your future. In our timeline, humanity has become one of the major powers in the galaxy." Dr. Kyung-soo stepped forward. "How is time travel possible?" "The same way faster than light travel is possible," Captain Wu Jin replied with a slight smile. "With technology, that seems impossible until you understand the principles behind it. But that is not why we are here." Admiral Tae-hyun looked at the tactical display showing the Vorthak fleet's continued retreat. "Why are you here?" "To ensure that certain events unfold as they should. In our timeline, this battle marks the beginning of the end for Vorthak expansion. Not because we destroyed them, but because they learned to fear something greater than themselves." Captain Dong-wook was studying the future humans with intense fascination. "You said you represent humanity's future. Does that mean all of this has already happened from your perspective?" "In a sense, yes. But time is more complicated than most people realize. There are multiple possible futures, and our presence here is part of ensuring that the best one comes to pass." Hyejin looked at her sensor readings again. "Captain Wu Jin, your ship appeared to come from empty space. Were you cloaked this entire time?" "We have been observing since before the Vorthak fleet arrived. We needed to assess the situation before revealing ourselves. The Coalition's performance in this crisis was satisfactory." There was something in the way he said that word that made Admiral Tae-hyun uncomfortable. "Satisfactory? We have been fighting for our lives against an enemy that has never been defeated." "And you have done well," Captain Wu Jin said. "Better than many civilizations faced with similar challenges. That is why we chose to intervene when we did." On the view screen, they could see other crew members moving around the future ship's bridge. All of them looked human, but their equipment and their bearing spoke of a military force that had seen conflicts beyond imagination. "The Vorthak fleet is now beyond the edge of this star system," Captain Wu Jin reported. "They will not return. Their fear of us runs deeper than their desire for conquest." Dr. Kyung-soo looked puzzled. "But why do they fear you? What happened in your timeline to make the Vorthak Empire retreat from human forces?" Captain Wu Jin's expression grew serious. "The Vorthak learned that humans fight differently than other species. Most civilizations fight for territory, for resources, for survival. Humans fight for principles, we fight for ideas, and we never, ever give up." He gestured to something off-screen, and the image changed to show the Vorthak fleet's retreat in real time. The enemy ships were moving at maximum speed, their formations scattered and desperate. 300 years ago, the Vorthak encountered the first human colony ships. They thought we would be easy prey, another primitive species to be conquered and enslaved. They were wrong. Admiral Tae-hyun leaned forward. What happened? We fought them for 7 years. Every battle, every skirmish, every engagement. We lost ships, we lost worlds, we lost millions of people. But we never stopped fighting. And slowly, the Vorthak began to realize that humans were different. Captain Woo Jin's voice carried the weight of history. Other species would surrender when the cost became too high. Humans just fought harder. Other species would negotiate when faced with overwhelming odds. Humans would find new ways to fight. Eventually, the Vorthak realized that conquering humanity would cost them more than they could ever gain. The bridge was silent as everyone absorbed this information. The idea that future humans had become so formidable that even the Vorthak Empire feared them was almost impossible to accept. But the evidence was right there in front of them, in the form of a ship that could appear and disappear at will, and a crew that spoke of galactic warfare as casually as others might discuss. The weather. Why tell us this? Hyejin asked. Why reveal yourselves at all? Captain Woo Jin smiled, and for a moment he looked less like a warrior from the future and more like a human being who cared about his ancestors. Because you need to know what you can become. Because the choices you make here and now will determine whether our timeline comes to pass or not. And because humanity's greatest strength has always been hope. Captain Woo Jin's image on the main view screen shifted as he moved to what appeared to be a tactical planning area on his ship's bridge. Behind him, holographic displays showed star maps spanning the entire galaxy, with markers indicating the locations of countless battles and campaigns. Admiral Tae-hyun, what I am about to tell you will sound impossible, the future captain began. But you have already seen proof that impossible things can happen. Time travel, ships that appear from nowhere, the Vorthak Empire running in fear. All impossible, yet all real. Admiral Tae-hyun nodded slowly. We are listening. In my timeline, humanity's entry into galactic politics changed everything. Not because we were the strongest or the smartest, but because we approached warfare differently than any species the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Woo Jin activated one of his holographic displays, showing battle scenarios that played out like three-dimensional movies. Most alien species fight for practical reasons: territory, resources, survival, dominance. Their wars have clear objectives and logical endpoints. When the cost becomes too high, they negotiate. When victory becomes impossible, they surrender. He highlighted different battles on the display. Humans fight for abstract concepts: freedom, justice, the right to exist as we choose. These are not things you can negotiate away or surrender. They are principles worth dying for. Dr. Kyung-soo leaned forward with interest. That explains the 7-year war you mentioned. The Vorthak could not understand why humans would keep fighting. A war they could not win. Exactly. From the Vorthak perspective, the war should have ended after the first year, when it became clear they had superior technology and numbers. They kept expecting humanity to see reason and surrender. Instead, humans adapted. Captain Woo Jin brought up another display showing the evolution of human military technology over time. Every defeat taught us something new. Every loss made us more determined. The Vorthak were fighting the same enemy they had always fought, a species that would eventually break under pressure. But humans do not break. We bend. We adapt. We find new ways to fight. Hyojin studied the technological progression shown in the displays. The advancement is incredible. In 7 years, humanity went from basic space travel to matching Vorthak military technology. War has a way of accelerating innovation, Captain Wu Jin said grimly, especially when the alternative is extinction. But technology was not our greatest advantage, Admiral Tae-hyun asked. What was? Psychology. Humans have a unique ability to get inside their enemy's head, to understand how they think and what they fear. We turned the Vorthak's own strengths against them. The display changed to show specific battle analyses. The Vorthak pride themselves on being perfect warriors. They study every enemy, plan every battle, account for every variable. But humans introduce chaos into their perfect systems. Captain Dong-wook looked puzzled. What kind of chaos? Unpredictability. Humans would do things that made no tactical sense, then somehow make them work anyway. We would sacrifice important objectives to save civilian populations. We would launch desperate attacks when retreat was the logical choice. We would keep fighting even when victory was mathematically impossible. Captain Wu Jin paused the display on a particular battle. This engagement took place in the 5th year of the war. The Vorthak had surrounded a human colony world with overwhelming force. By every calculation, the humans should have surrendered to save lives. Instead, they evacuated the civilians and then fought to the last person to buy time for the evacuation. That sounds like suicide, Captain Dong-wook observed. It was. But it was also a message. The Vorthak realized that humans would rather die than live under their rule. More importantly, they realized that conquering humanity would require killing every single human in the galaxy. The cost in time, resources, and Vorthak lives would be enormous. Dr. Kong-soo nodded in understanding. So they decided it was not worth the effort. Partly, yes. But there was more to it than simple cost-benefit analysis. The Vorthak began to fear what would happen if they succeeded in conquering humanity. Admiral Tae-hyun looked confused. Fear success? Why? Captain Wu Jin's expression grew serious. Because they realized that any species capable of fighting that hard for freedom would never truly be conquered. They would spend the next 1,000 years dealing with human rebellions, resistance movements, and revenge attacks. The Vorthak Empire would be forced to become a police state just to keep humanity under control. He brought up another display, showing population and resource allocation charts. The Vorthak are efficient conquerors because their subjects usually accept defeat and integrate into the empire. But humans would never integrate. They would be a constant drain on resources and a permanent source of instability. Hyojin was beginning to understand. So the Vorthak made a strategic decision to avoid humanity rather than try to conquer us. Exactly. And once that decision was made, it became easier to justify retreating from other difficult conquests as well. Why? Fight a costly war when you could expand elsewhere with less resistance? Captain Wu Jin gestured to the star map behind him. Over the following centuries, humanity grew stronger while the Vorthak Empire became more cautious. We never fought another major war with them, but our reputation spread throughout the galaxy. Species that were facing Vorthak invasion would send distress calls to human worlds, hoping we would intervene. Admiral Tae-hyun was beginning to see the bigger picture. And did you? Intervene, I mean? Sometimes. When the cause was just, and the people were truly defending themselves, yes. Humans have a weakness for lost causes and hopeless battles. We cannot seem to resist helping the underdog. Dr. Kyung-soo looked at the historical data with new understanding. That explains the legends. The silent death ships that appeared to help smaller civilizations against aggressive empires. Those legends are based on real events, human ships appearing to even the odds when peaceful species were threatened by conquest. We do not often engage in direct combat. Our reputation usually makes that unnecessary. The mere knowledge that humans might intervene is often enough to make aggressors reconsider their plans. Captain Wu Jin changed the display to show the current situation around Kepler 442b. Which brings us to today. In our timeline, this battle was the first time the current generation of Vorthak commanders encountered human forces. The stories they had heard seemed like ancient history until they saw the indomitable Decloak. Captain Dongwook studied the tactical display. Your ship alone was enough to make them retreat? The ship represents something more than weapons and technology. It represents 300 years of human stubbornness, creativity, and refusal to give up. The Vorthak looked at the indomitable and saw not just one ship, but the potential for endless conflict with an enemy that would never stop fighting. Hyejin looked at her sensor readings of the future ship. But you could have destroyed their entire fleet, could you not? Captain Wu Jin nodded. Easily. But that would have taught them nothing except to fear our weapons. Instead, we let them make the choice to retreat. They went back to their empire with the knowledge that humans were watching, that we would protect our allies, and that fighting us would cost more than they could afford to pay. Admiral Tae-hyun was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had heard. So humanity becomes the galaxy's unofficial peacekeeping force? Unofficial is the key word. We do not rule anyone. We do not demand tribute or territory. We simply make it known that aggressive expansion will be met with resistance. Most species find it easier to pursue peaceful expansion instead. The bridge fell silent, as everyone absorbed the implications of this revelation. Humanity's future was not as conquerors or rulers, but as guardians. It was a role that seemed to fit with everything they knew about human nature, but it also raised questions about how that future would come to pass and what role the current crew would play in creating it. Captain Wu Jin's expression grew more serious as he looked directly at Hyejin through the view screen. Lieutenant Commander, I need to speak with you privately. What I am about to share cannot be discussed openly among the coalition forces. Admiral Tae-hyun looked uncertain. Why Hyejin specifically? Because in our timeline, she becomes the catalyst for everything that follows. The decisions she makes in the next few hours will determine whether humanity's future unfolds as it should, or whether we create a different, potentially darker timeline. Hyejin felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of decisions? That is what we need to discuss. Admiral Tae-hyun, I request permission to transport Lieutenant Commander Hyejin to the Indomitable for a brief conference. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew that stepping aboard that mysterious ship meant entering technology far beyond their understanding, meeting people who claimed to be from the future and potentially learning things that could not be unlearned. How do we know you? We'll return her safely, Admiral Tae-hyun asked. Captain Wu Jin smiled slightly. Because in our timeline she lives to be 97 years old and dies peacefully in her sleep after founding the Human Defense Academy. But that future is not guaranteed. It depends on choices that have not yet been made. Hyejin looked around the bridge at her colleagues and friends. Part of her was terrified of what she might learn aboard that ship. But another part of her was intensely curious about humanity's future and her role in creating it. I will go. she said quietly. Admiral Tae-hyun nodded reluctantly. Very well. But I want constant communication. And at the first sign of trouble, you come back immediately. Understood, sir. The transport process was unlike anything Hyejin had ever experienced. One moment she was standing on the bridge of her own ship, and the next she was materializing in a beam of light aboard the Indomitable. The technology was so smooth and seamless that she barely felt the transition, the interior of the future. Ship was even more impressive than what they had seen on the view screen. The corridors were wide and filled with soft light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Everything was clean, efficient, and somehow beautiful at the same time. Captain Wu Jin met her as the transport completed. Up close, he looked remarkably ordinary for someone from 300 years in the future. He could have been any human officer, except for the weight of experience in his eyes. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable," he said. "I apologize for the dramatic circumstances, but time travel has its limitations. We cannot stay in your timeline for very long without risking paradoxes." He led her through corridors lined with displays showing tactical information from across the galaxy. What you see here represents the accumulated military knowledge of 3 centuries of human warfare. Everything we have learned about strategy, technology, and psychology. They entered a room that Hyejin could only describe as a library made of light. Holographic books and documents floated in organized patterns around them, containing more information than she could process in a lifetime. "This is our strategic archive," Captain Wu Jin explained. "Every battle humans have fought, every innovation we have developed, every lesson we have learned. I am going to transfer a small portion of this knowledge to you." Hyejin looked around in amazement. "How small a portion? Enough to give you the tools you will need to begin humanity's transformation into a major galactic power. The rest you will have to discover for yourselves, just as we did." He gestured to a chair that looked like it was made of crystal and metal woven together. "The transfer process will feel overwhelming at first. You will be receiving 300 years of military innovation compressed into a few minutes. But your mind is strong enough to handle it." Hyejin sat in the chair, feeling it adjust automatically to her body. "What exactly will I learn?" "Tactical principles that will not be discovered for decades. Psychological warfare techniques that will make the Vorthak fear even small human forces. Technology concepts that your scientists can begin developing immediately." Captain Wu Jin moved to a control panel that seemed to respond to his thoughts as much as his touch. "But more importantly, you will understand why humans become what we become. It is not about superior technology or perfect strategy. It is about never giving up, never accepting defeat, and always fighting for something bigger than ourselves. Is this why the Vorthak fear you? Because you never surrender?" "Partly. But there is more to it than that. Humans fight differently because we see war differently. Most species see warfare as a tool for achieving goals. Humans see it as a test of principles. We do not just want to win battles. We want to be worthy of victory." The chair began to hum softly, and Hyejin felt a strange tingling sensation in her head. "What does that mean?" "It means we hold ourselves to higher standards than our enemies do. We protect civilians even when it is tactically disadvantageous. We show mercy even to those who would show us none. We fight for freedom not just for ourselves, but for everyone." The tingling became stronger, and suddenly Hyejin's mind was flooded with images and information. Battle plans that used psychology as much as weapons. Technologies that seemed impossible but followed logical principles. Most importantly, a way of thinking about warfare that she had never considered before. The goal is not to destroy your enemies. Captain Wu Jin's voice seemed to come from very far away. The goal is to make them understand that opposing you will cost more than they are willing to pay, while showing them that cooperation will benefit everyone. Hyejin saw flashes of future battles where human forces won not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding of their enemy's psychology. She saw technologies that used an enemy's own weapons against them. She saw strategies that turned certain defeat into unlikely victory through sheer determination and creative thinking. But most importantly, she saw what humans could become when they refused to accept that any cause was truly hopeless. The transfer seemed to last for hours, but when it was complete, only minutes had passed. Hyejin sat in the chair feeling like her head was full of lightning and her thoughts were moving at the speed of light. The knowledge will settle into your mind over the next few days, Captain Wu Jin explained. Some of it will seem obvious, as if you had always known it. Other parts will become clear only when you need them most. He helped her stand, steadying her as she adjusted to the new information filling her thoughts. But remember, knowledge alone is not enough. The future I represent only comes to pass if you and your generation have the courage to make the difficult choices. What kind of choices? Whether to use this knowledge responsibly, whether to fight for principles or just for victory, whether to become protectors or conquerors. The same information that creates peacekeepers can also create tyrants. Hyejin looked around the archive again, understanding now that she was seeing not just military knowledge, but the accumulated wisdom of humanity's future moral development. Why trust me with this? Why not give it to Admiral Tae-hyun or someone with more authority? Captain Wu Jin smiled. Because you are the one who will know what to do with it. In our timeline, you use this knowledge to revolutionize human military doctrine. You create the first truly ethical war college in galactic history. You teach future generations that strength without mercy is just another form of weakness, he led her back toward the transport chamber. But that future is not guaranteed. Every choice you make from now on will either bring it closer or push it further away. The responsibility is enormous, but so is the potential. As they reached the transport chamber, Captain Wu Jin turned to face her one last time. The Vorthak will test humanity again in the coming years. Other species will challenge us as well. Each time, you will have to choose between the easy path and the right path. Choose the right path, even when it costs more than you want to pay. What if I make the wrong choice? Hyejin asked. Then we will never meet, because the timeline that created us will never come to pass. But I have faith in you. You are human, which means you will find a way to do the impossible when it matters most. The transport beam activated, and Hyejin felt herself dissolving into light. The last thing she heard was Captain Wu Jin's voice saying, "Make us proud, ancestor. Make us proud." Hyejin materialized back on the bridge of the Coalition flagship, feeling like a completely different person. The knowledge that Captain Wu Jin had transferred to her was settling into her mind like pieces of a vast puzzle finding their proper places. She could feel new understanding forming, new connections being made between ideas she had never considered before. Admiral Tae-hyun looked at her with concern. "Are you all right? You were gone for 20 minutes?" 20 minutes? Hyejin checked the chronometer and saw that he was right. It had felt like hours aboard the Indomitable. "I am fine, sir. Better than fine, actually. We need to talk." Before Admiral Tae-hyun could respond, the communications officer called out. "Sir, the future ship is hailing us again." Captain Woo Jin's image appeared on the main view screen one last time. "Admiral, the Indomitable must depart now. Our presence in this timeline has already caused enough temporal stress. But before we go, I want to leave you with something." The tactical displays around the bridge suddenly lit up with new information. Weapon designs, shield modifications, engine improvements, dozens of technological upgrades that were years ahead of anything the Coalition had developed. "These technologies will give you an advantage in future conflicts," Captain Woo Jin explained. "But remember, technology alone never wins wars. It is how you use it that matters." Dr. Kyung-soo was frantically taking notes as the technical data scrolled past. "This is incredible. Some of these designs are completely revolutionary." "Use them wisely," Captain Woo Jin said. "And remember what you have learned here today. The galaxy is watching to see what humanity will become. Show them that strength and compassion can exist together." The image of the future captain began to flicker and fade. Hyejin knows what must be done. Trust her judgment, even when it seems to go against conventional wisdom. Especially then. With those words, the transmission ended. On the main view screen, they watched as the massive Indomitable began to fade from normal space-time. Within minutes, it was gone completely, leaving only empty space where the most advanced ship in human history had been. Admiral Tae-hyun turned to Hee-jin. "What did he mean? You know what must be done." Hee-jin looked at the tactical displays still showing the new technologies, then at the sensor readings of the space where the Vorthak fleet had been. Ideas were forming in her mind, strategies that seemed to come from nowhere, but felt absolutely right. "Sir, we need to change everything about how we approach warfare." "What do you mean?" "The Vorthak will be back. Maybe not here, maybe not soon, but they will test us again. When they do, we need to be ready not just with better weapons, but with better thinking." Captain Dongwook looked puzzled. "Better thinking?" Hyejin activated the main tactical display and began calling up star charts of the surrounding systems. The traditional approach to warfare is to build bigger ships, stronger weapons, better defenses. But humans have a different advantage. We can outthink our enemies. She highlighted several star systems on the display. The Vorthak expansion follows predictable patterns. They conquer systems with valuable resources first, then consolidate their gains before moving on to the next target. But what if we made their expansion too costly to continue? Admiral Tae-hyun studied the star charts. How? By making every battle a lesson in why conquering humans is a bad idea. We do not just defend ourselves, we make the Vorthak question whether they want to keep fighting us at all. Dr. Kyung-soo looked intrigued. Psychological warfare? Exactly, but not the kind that most species use. We do not want to make them hate us more. We want to make them respect us so much that they choose to leave us alone. Hyejin began sketching out battle plans that incorporated the new knowledge flowing through her mind. Every engagement we fight should send a message. We are not just another species to be conquered. We are something different, something that will never stop fighting for what we believe in. Captain Dongwook watched the plans take shape with growing amazement. These strategies are incredible. Where did you learn to think like this? From 300 years of human military development compressed into 20 minutes, Hyejin said with a slight smile. And it is only the beginning. We need to start training officers to think differently about warfare. We need to develop technologies that support our new approach. Most importantly, we need to decide what kind of galactic power humanity wants to become. Admiral Tae-hyun looked at the strategic plans spreading across the displays. What do you recommend? We become protectors, not conquerors. When smaller civilizations face aggression from larger empires, we help them. Not because we want to rule them, but because it is the right thing to do. We make it known throughout the galaxy that humans stand for something more than just human interests. The bridge was quiet as everyone absorbed this radical vision for humanity's future. It was ambitious beyond anything they had ever considered, but somehow it felt absolutely right. The Vorthak will test us again within 5 years, Hae-jin continued. When they do, we need to be ready with strategies they have never encountered before. We need to fight in ways that make them question everything they think they know about warfare. Dr. Kyung-soo looked up from his analysis of the new technologies. With these technical advances, we could certainly build ships capable of matching Vorthak firepower. We could, Hae-jin agreed, but that is not the point. The point is to build ships that make the Vorthak realize that fighting humans will never be worth the cost. We want them to look at our forces and think, these people will never give up, and they will make us pay for every victory. Captain Dong-wook was studying the psychological warfare principles in Hee-jin's plans. This is brilliant. You are not just planning to defeat the Vorthak, you are planning to change how they think about conquest itself. Exactly. And once word spreads that humans cannot be easily conquered, other aggressive species will think twice before attacking anyone under our protection. Admiral Tae-hyun walked to the main view screen and looked out at the stars. You are talking about fundamentally changing humanity's role in galactic politics. I am talking about living up to what we could become, Hae-jin said. Captain Woo-jin showed me what humanity accomplishes in his timeline. We become the species that others call when they need help against impossible odds. We become the ones who never give up, never surrender, and never accept that any cause is truly hopeless. She joined Admiral Tae-hyun at the view screen. But most importantly, we never forget that strength without compassion is just another form of tyranny. We fight for principles, not for power. The bridge crew worked through the night, analyzing the new technologies and developing strategies based on Hye-jin's vision for humanity's future. By morning, they had the beginnings of a completely new approach to military doctrine. 6 months later, the first Vorthak probe ships appeared in human space, testing their defenses. They found human forces that fought with tactics they had never seen before, using technologies that seemed impossible, guided by a determination that defied all logic. The Vorthak ships retreated after 3 brief engagements, carrying reports back to their empire that would fundamentally change how they viewed humanity. For the first time in their history, they had encountered an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each battle, more determined with each setback. Within a year, other species in the galaxy began to hear stories about the strange humans who fought for abstract concepts like freedom and justice. Some dismissed these stories as propaganda. Others began to wonder if perhaps there was something different about this new spacefaring species. And on a small space station orbiting Earth, a young cadet named Woo-jin was beginning his training at the newly established Human Defense Academy, founded by Admiral Hae-jin to teach future generations that true strength came not from the ability to destroy enemies, but from the wisdom to turn enemies into friends. The circle was beginning to close, 300 years before it would be, completed by a ship that could travel through time to inspire its own creation, Humanity's greatest victory would not be won through superior weapons or perfect tactics, but through the simple refusal to accept that peace was impossible. The galaxy was about to learn what humans meant when they said that some things were worth fighting for, no matter what the cost.